Welcome to another town hall meeting from Resurrection Parish. In this year, we're speaking of the sacramental system and how those sacraments come forth as moments of grace, enriching our lives, bringing us closer in faith to our God and to each other. Specifically this time, we're speaking about reconciliation. How so often in our world we are divided, we're not quite together, unified in who we are or where we're going in life, and we need to come back to a good sense of being counseled in how we are to live with each other, and especially through our faith. So let's take a moment in prayer and ask our God to help us on this journey. We need that sense of faith and hope in our lives, and as we gather today, with all of us here at Foundations Health and Wholeness, that as an agency, as we gather as a people of God here in the Green Bay area, that our lives may be touched with a sense of love and care for each other. We may grow in our own faith, as we're not always comfortable where we are today, but how do we talk through, how do we come together in a way that brings hope and faith to ourselves, to our families, to those around us. As you and as the Holy Family, you gathered, you brought about a sense of faith and hope, and you gave us what we need in our church today to come together as people of God. As we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Tony, who are these good people?
Well, we're at Foundations Health and Wholeness on West Mason Street in Green Bay, and I get the chance to introduce our two guests for this town hall meeting. And first of all, we have Ryan Good. Ryan is the CEO, Executive Director of Foundations Health and Wholeness, so oversees this operation, which does mental health counseling as well as foster care. And then we also have Lana Cheslak, who I have known for many, many years, since she was a sophomore in high school, I think, back in her Ashwaubenon high school days as a star pitcher. And so she is the director of the counseling services here at Foundation. So Thanks for being part of our little production here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for welcoming us into your home, your office space here. So
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks.
I really, honestly, I don't know what you do here. Can you go a little more in depth of what you actually do here?
I sure can, yeah.
Come your way?
So Foundations has been around since 1965 in this community, and really we have three pillars of care. One is our counseling program, so we have a counseling clinic, and then we also embed therapists in schools, in homeless shelters, in the Aging and Disability Resource Center. So that's one of our pillars. The second is foster care. And so we work with kids who've been abused and neglected, need out-of-home care. And then we license, recruit, train all of our own foster families, place those children into foster homes, and do the case management services for those kids until permanency can be achieved. And then our most recent program that we acquired is called RAISE, and that's working with homeless and runaway youth. And so what we do is when there's a youth either at risk or on the run, we connect with those youth through some outreach activities, do family mediation to try and get the child back home. And if that isn't an option, we find safe and stable housing for those kids. We help meet some of their basic needs during that time, and then work on long-term permanency for those kids.
Ryan, you said that Foundations has been around for a long time. So can you just quickly go through just a little bit of the history? Because I think people will be aware of Foundations, but maybe not by the name.
Absolutely, yeah. So we used to be called the American Foundation of Counseling Services, and we were founded in 1965 by George Kress and Norman Vincent Peale. He wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, and basically George Kress wanted to bring Foundations to Green Bay as a way to integrate mental health and spirituality. So anyone who had a faith could come and have their faith as part of the treatment plan during their counseling sessions. And so that's definitely an aspect that we still hold very valuable today, is that integration of spirituality into care.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was speaking with a therapist counselor at one point, and he left an agency because they would not allow him to speak on faith at all. Okay. Even if the person brought it up themselves, he was still not allowed to do that.
Okay.
So is that pretty common out there as far as you understand? Obviously you have a niche here in being able to talk about faith.
It depends on the system. So, as a private nonprofit, we have the freedom to choose to allow that. Whereas if you were working for, let's say, a medical entity, there may be some limitations around that. Now, previously, I worked for Affinity, which was a Catholic affiliated hospital system, so it was allowed. So there's different variations depending on the type of organization, where the funding comes from, if there is government involved, and
Gotcha.
that would set some additional limitations. Unfortunately, I think that's a negative. As far as the mental health field is concerned, because that spirituality component is often the lifeline that keeps people, motivated to move forward and to work through all of the trials and the tribulations that they're facing in life.
Right.
So, those organizations, I feel like, are missing a very great opportunity of strength for the individuals that are coming into session.
Right. Does the average person coming to your agency, do they come with a sense of faith, or do they discover it along the way, or?
They do. A very large percentage of the individuals who come to this organization come here because they know we allow and offer that spirituality component to the services, because it's such a significant part of their life before they come in, that they don't want to leave that out of their healing process or their journey. So they're seeking some place where they can truly be themselves, and then they're allowed that opportunity here.
Right. So, if I have issues in my life, can I come in to your front door and say, hey, I'd like to see a counselor?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's open to anybody at any time for any kind of issue? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What I also appreciate about foundations is that, and I think this is where it also fits into our faith and resurrection parish community, is that we're, our whole goal is to love all God's people all the time. And so we're always looking for ways to reach out in the community to those on the margins. And I know, being on the board of directors here, that foundations serves a great many people who can't afford services in most other places. But that's a big part of the mission here, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that was part of, again, back in 1965 with George Kress, where he wanted spiritually integrated care, everyone to have the ability to receive mental health care regardless of ability to pay, and the highest quality of mental health care. And so right now, 49% of those that we see here are un or underinsured in our community.
Wow. And it seems like, since we're talking about reconciliation this month, that for me, it seems like reconciliation is needed most when relationships are broken, or when somebody's just not living in a right relationship, either with themselves or with others or with God. So how does Foundations help walk with people through that process of putting relationships back together?
Well, I think you were spot on. It has to start with the relationship with the self. And all too often, individuals who walk into our office are leading with shame. They're leading with guilt, hurt, from trauma experiences, from past life experiences that may or may not have been out of their control, but they still hold the responsibility. And so that piece of reconciliation is so directly connected with what we do, because we have to allow people to understand that, one, there is support for them even if mistakes were made, that they are still lovable, that they still have value, and we help them work through that shame. And shame is so powerful that if we do not work through the shame, that's where things like depression and anxiety and other mental health conditions present, because your body is only built to be able to have a certain capacity. And if we build that capacity too big, it comes out sideways, upside down, and in legitimate mental health conditions.
So Lana, what do you think is the source, or maybe there's not a common denominator with people, but maybe there is. What's the source many times of that shame that they present?
Well, I think, for so many, when we're talking about abusive situations, the typical abuse cycle includes the abuser putting the shame and the guilt and the responsibility on the victim. And that hits so deep. Unfortunately, all too often, and not always, but that verbal abuse is far more detrimental to a human being and a human soul than physical abuse, because they can't unhear those things. Those things are resounding in their mind and their memory. And I am not at all saying that physical abuse is less intrusive or hurtful. but I think it is the power of the word is understated. The long-term impact, the resonation that those words and that control has over another human being. And nobody is able to solve those types of situations and that grief and that abuse independently. We all need somebody to help us through that process, to be that support system, to help us recognize where things maybe went wrong or information was not valid, and to help rewrite that record in our mind that we listen to. And if we are able to do that, then we can heal, and we can give that back to where, the individual or the situation that provided and created that shame. The individual does not need to carry that. And without asking for that help, asking for forgiveness and their perceived role in that, even if that perception is off, is a very powerful tool in healing.
And in that process, I'm assuming a lot of addictions come forth,
Absolutely.
whether from the victim and or the abuser. You deal directly with that, with addictions and...
We do, of all kinds.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Did you want to say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we have therapists that specialize in substance abuse, addictions. Yeah, again, just about anything can become an addiction. And so if it's something that's impairing someone's life and ability to accomplish the things they would like to, or maintain employment, or challenges with relationships, those are all things that our therapists are addressed to work through with the individual.
I would imagine in addiction situations, I mean, the person, I would think more times than not, have made a mess of not only themselves, but their relationships, their families, their workplaces. So do you work with the person solely, or do you work with them in terms of their family and bring the family in, or how's that all work out?
We do bring family in when it's appropriate and when the individual is ready for that. So, we work with them on reconciling whatever the scenario is and whatever they feel responsible for within themselves first. We help empower them, build that confidence and that inner strength. And then we help them learn the communication skills to start bridging those gaps and repairing relationships, whether that be with a significant other, an employer, a child. All of those different situations, and we do bring others into those sessions to help facilitate and make sure that they have the confidence to address with the support behind them to make it as successful as it possibly can be.
And what's your advice for people in those situations? I'm thinking of family members who's the person living in this family has got an addiction or some other mental health issue that's presenting itself and causing the relationships in the family to break down. But the person doesn't want to come here. What's your advice to the other family members to, get them here, get the help, or wherever, get the help that they need to move on?
We often talk with the individual about what that resistance might be about. And if they feel that, it would be appropriate, if they would like to have a one-on-one conversation with the therapist so that we can educate and kind of let them know what the boundaries and the rules to that type of situation may be so that they can also come in and feel safe and comfortable. We don't ever want anybody walking into this office and feel like they're being set up or that they're going to be attacked. The goal is always we will never have a family session or a group session without very clear rules and boundaries set in place to protect everybody involved. And we often will have a lifeguard involved, for lack of better terminology, or another co-therapist involved, so that if somebody is struggling and needs to step out, that there is somebody to follow and address whatever came up for that individual, and the rest of the conversation can continue. We don't ever want anybody to walk out unsupported.
Right. One of the things that I'm hearing a bit more and more is in the addiction is pornography. And it's kind of, you're talking about shame earlier, and it seems to be a lot of that coming forth with that. What can you say about that? Do you specifically help in those situations?
We do. actually, we just recently staffed a case regarding pornography and pornography addiction and unfaithfulness in a marriage, and the broken communication and trust involved in that relationship, and ways for the individual who is the client to be able to rebuild that trust and to be able to find an identity that is separate from, this individual who is addicted to pornography. Am I a pedophile because I, have gone down these roads? In the therapeutic process, we go to really evaluating what is the root and how did he get to the point, or how did she get to the point of this type of addiction. And all too often, those individuals have a significant trauma history. Not always is there sexual abuse involved in their childhood, but many times there is. And if that is unresolved and untreated, it again comes out in ways that is unproductive, unhealthy, and harmful. And then it ends up, resulting in harm to another individual when that was never the intention.
Right, right.
You've both have been involved in this field for quite a while, I feel. And how would you see, or would you describe how mental health issues have changed? Like, are there some that are more prevalent now than they were before? Some that are more difficult to deal with maybe than they used, that kind of thing.
Real quickly, a lot of our readings these days during the ordinary time are about demons being cast out, and and the assuming a seizure type situation, and so spiritually it was seemed to have been taken care of in that way back when, but I'm assuming we don't see it that way anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
Well,
And so those demons have been around for quite a while.
The demon around the way back in scriptural times. How far back in history you want to go?
Right.
Absolutely.
I think we've learned a lot over the years. And so I think, sure, there are things that are more prevalent these days as the world has changed and society has changed and our norms have changed. Things have compounded. I think there's probably more depression than there used to be in some situations. But I don't think that these mental health issues never existed. I think we just learned to identify them. We now understand more what they are and where they're rooted. And so that at times I think makes us feel that there's more prevalence rather than a greater awareness, better education, and a better ability to treat and intervene, provide some peace and some resolution to situations that previously were cast off as demons or other, they were kind of back quite not even that many years ago. There would be the town crazy. They weren't crazy. They had mental health issues. We just didn't know enough to be able to support them and to treat them, and so we set them aside because we didn't know what to do with them. And we have just grown significantly in our ability to recognize and to treat with compassion and to assist in managing rather than casting aside.
Big issue. Back when I was a kid, we had in Appleton, there was the mental health facility, what they call them, asylums back, way back when, and we kind of lock them away.
Correct.
And now it's not that way, right? Or less of that way anyway.
Yes.
So how's that working?
There's some pros and some cons to that.
It's a $1 million question.
I think I definitely think there's some pros and cons because there are still some individuals who are tremendously ill and really do need an extremely high level of care for safety for themselves and safety for others around them.
And now they go to jail.
Unfortunately, many of them do.
Absolutely.
Many of them do, yes. And then there are many, I think we have gone so far the opposite direction that I think there's a large number of individuals in our community who could use a higher level of care that cannot access a higher level of care. And so families are left trying to figure out how to manage it within the home and manage it within our schools and our churches and our organizations, that employ multiple individuals. And we are trying to figure it out all together. And it's a complicated issue, and it's very difficult, and many times not well handled.
Right.
What's nice is our field, though, has evolved over, I don't know, the last 15 to 20 years with a lot of evidence-based practices. And so now there's just more understanding of the effectiveness of treatment, where it's not now where it was seen as an art, and now it's seen more as a science in terms of what we're able to implement, the modalities, and what kind of effectiveness we're going to have with treating, these various challenges.
Yeah.
What about the effects of isolation coming out of COVID? I mean, that's been a lot. There's a lot of literature on that as well, in terms of the effect on mental health. So, how have you seen that? And
absolutely.
What's your
interestingly, media had reported all of these effects during the pandemic. And here at Foundations, we saw the effects after the world started opening up rather than during. That isolation, created additional anxieties about reintegrating back into a world that potentially is filled with germs and viruses that could be very dangerous and lethal. It created separation anxiety. It created social anxiety, obsessive compulsive type of traits and disorders, people overly concerned or maybe not overly concerned with germs and washing and where am I going and who else is going to be there. And then
Are conspiracy theories hooked into all that too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we certainly, within our employees, within our clientele, we see all of it. And it's been very detrimental. I mean, and challenging even as an organization is how do we bridge the gap pre-COVID to post-COVID? How do we support our employees? How do we be conscientious and considerate, and yet still be a business with limitations and rules and boundaries in order to keep our doors open and provide the best service to the community that we can. It's been a challenge as an organization. How do you meet that? And then with our clients, the same. How comfortable are they? What sorts of new presentation and symptomology are they experiencing as a result of the world shutting down?
Well, we've all gone through it. We had that year or whatever else, however long we hid away. Is there a couple things that the average person can look at in their own life as far as how isolated we still feel? Are we still hesitating to go public? Are we still having some of those symptoms, or those?
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about often, within the clinical team is addressing with our clients that it's okay to be afraid. And the fear may be very real and very valid. And then doing some fact checking. Am I safe in this situation? And then relying on others, to really help provide the support that they need in order to reintegrate into the world. Whether it's having to attend a doctor's appointment or it's going back to school or going back to the office. Acknowledging the fear allows us to control the fear. And that's one of the biggest things that we work on a daily basis with clients in general, and was just exacerbated by COVID.
Right.
It's not a new thing that we work on, but the amount of it that we have
intense.
seen, it is far more intense.
Right. And again, faith-based, I think part of Jesus' main ministry to me seems to be he took people from the outside and brought them in. He took the families that were divided and he put them together again. The forgiveness, the healing, that seemed to be his main mission. And that seems to be part of what we need to do and look at in our own lives after COVID and after isolation is, are we willing to do that? Is that still our goal as church? Is it still our goal as society to really come together again?
Right. Yeah, very true.
Right.
something Jesus didn't have access to is telehealth. And so I'm wondering, that certainly became prevalent during COVID. Mm-hmm. I think it's diminished a bit, but do you see that continuing to be part of how you provide your services? And
as I came in right here, they were making an appointment for somebody on Zoom.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
It's happening.
So how prevalent is it? Is it decreasing, increasing? Where
it's
are we
decreasing.
at?
More than we had anticipated, to be honest. I think it will always be a part of the way we do business from now until forever. However, I don't think we anticipated the significant level of decrease in the requests. We actually have the vast majority of our new intakes requesting in person. They are saying, I zoomed out. I've had my work has gone fully remote. I want human contact again. I feel more connected with my therapist when I'm in person. And so we have actually had to counter with our staff and say, we have to meet the clients where they're at. So we had to request our staff come back into the office an additional day a week to meet the community need, because that is what's best for our clients.
So your therapists were also at home.
They are, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes, and we still do have therapists at home
Right.
2 days a week,
Okay.
but they're in the office 3 days a week.
Oh, interesting.
So the other side of life that you work with here is foster care, and I know, Ryan, your background is in that.
Yeah.
That is a whole nother side of relationships that have been broken and messed up and needing to be put back together somehow
Yes.
through reconciliation. Can you talk a little bit about how Foundations does foster care?
Yes, absolutely. So we start working with the kids and families after they have been removed. And so the break has already happened. There's typically, in most cases, there's been significant abuse or neglect, which has caused the break in that relationship and even in the physical closeness of the kids and their parents. One thing I'll say, though, in terms of reconciliation, and I think it goes back to where Jesus says, have childlike faith, is in 99% of the youth we work with, their number one priority is to get back home with mom and dad. And, for many years I could never wrap my mind around it. But as I've, just continued to work and process in this field, it's mom, it's dad. They're humanizing these individuals and who they are in their lives. And I think
Even though there might be the abusers,
absolutely.
they still want to
Yeah.
go back home.
Yep. They still want to go back home because that's mom and dad, and that's what's familiar. And that's who they've known for their entire lives.
And that's the life they've known as being abused.
Yes, exactly.
That's home
Exactly.
to them.
And so you're saying in the vast majority of the cases, they don't go back home because of the mess of the abuse and everything? Is that what you're saying?
No, actually, I'd say about 80% of our kids end up being reunified
do.
with their families. Yep, exactly. And
That's got to be a tough call.
it is. Yeah, and it's usually a combination of us, the counties, and the court system that works together to, determine what's the best form of permanency for these kids. And so it's definitely a really tough call. However, what's nice is there are supports currently in the system that are helping parents with the issues that they're needing to work through in order to create a safe place, a safe environment for their kids. And then we have a therapist here at Foundations that works predominantly with foster youth and foster parents and biological parents who's willing to work on those reunification challenges, issues, and really, ultimately it comes down to reconciliation to place the child back at home if at all possible.
And as I know from my board experience here, that it's much easier to find a foster care family for a wee little one, but for those teens who
Yes.
a little more up in the years,
Yes.
a little more difficult, right?
It is. And, honestly, the reconciliation can be more difficult as well because whether the abuse or neglect was lasting a lot longer before it was identified, and the older kids have more insight into their parents, the challenges. They still have the hope of their parents being able to break an addiction and choose them over the drugs. And so sometimes if that doesn't happen, then you see those emotions, the hurt, the sadness, the depression come out in behaviors and emotions. Yeah.
It's also the age when sexuality is coming up for the teens, and I'm assuming there are issues with that and getting booted out of the house, for example, or
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's our RAISE program that works with a lot of kids that have been booted out due to, sexual identity and desires of, their kids. And so those are all topics that we have to work through in our mediation process with families. And Yeah,
That sounds like a great program.
it is.
A lot of
It
need
is. Yep.
for
There
that.
is a lot of need. Yeah.
If
yeah.
someone wants to become a foster care family, how do they go about that?
Yeah, well, they contact us here at Foundations, and basically we start them with the application process. There are, of course, background checks, reference checks. There's training that's required before becoming a foster parent to help equip in what it's going to be like. Go through an extensive home study process. And then after the successful completion of those components, you can become a licensed foster parent. Your license is good for 2 years, and then what happens is when an appropriate child is referred to us based on whatever the parents' age desires, sex desires, those are gender desires. That is how we match kids with the appropriate foster families, and then they can maintain their license for 2 years and then renew it after that.
And I take it there's good support there. They're not just thrown to the wolves.
Yes, our case managers
walk
are.
with them a little
yes,
bit in this
yes.
process.
Every foster home has a case manager they can call 24/7. So if anything comes up, whether it's during business hours or in the middle of the night, they can call and get advice on how to handle a certain situation or how to de-escalate a certain situation, and get that reassurance of how to navigate things.
We also have 2 of our therapists who, in addition to their clinical duties here, have offered to support the foster parents in more of a mentorship way. So they have Eileen and Joanne both have caseloads of existing foster parents who provide care for Foundations, and they have regular check-ins and an opportunity for them to have a different level of support, talk through different situations, voice frustrations of conflict that's happening in the home, looking for additional ideas on how to find some peace and some reconciliation to the situation that's at hand. And that's a different level of support and intervention, so they get both. They have the opportunity to reach out, and maybe sometimes the conflict is, hey, we're really struggling having all of these professionals in our lives, and we don't want to offend our caseworker because they're great, but this is a lot. And so they can then vent that to Joanne or Eileen without worrying about hurting the feelings of the professionals that are involved in their care. So we offer that to them as well, which is a unique piece of our program that others don't offer.
Yes. So a typical family, you'd be looking foster care parents typically.
They could be single. It could be 2-parent homes, and any socioeconomic status. Really, it just takes a parent who is just willing to invest in these kids and has this passion.
But typically a parent, like a priest
yes.
couldn't do it.
No, priests could do it. Absolutely. Yes,
Do you
absolutely.
have that kind of time?
I don't know.
Or energy?
Well, that might be the issue. I know a priest who adopted a couple of children.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yep.
I have a dog. That takes a lot of time.
They do. They're like,
Right. Well, one last question I have is, this whole year we're looking at sacraments as moments of grace, but we also talk a lot about that. Just if you keep your eyes and your ears open, your awareness open, there are moments of grace all over all the time. So in your work here at Foundations, can you name like a time or two where you've really experienced a moment of grace?
oh, there are so many.
Aha moments.
Yeah.
Aha moments.
I mean, I have one that comes to mind that just recently happened. So we just hired 2 Spanish-speaking staff within our organization. And we had a child who was supposed to see Lana for therapy in the afternoon. And this mother ended up calling up on the phone, hysterical. She speaks very broken English, mostly Spanish. And our front desk staff was able to calm her down and really find out what was happening. Ended up being a domestic violence situation where she was unsafe. She was hurting. She had her child. She was able to get in her car, and she was on her way here to fill out some paperwork for her child's appointment. Because we had those Spanish-speaking staff, when she came in, they were able to communicate with her, calm her down, and then also really be there to support her and help her navigate on how to be safe and what are the next steps to take. We had other staff that helped this youth who was here feel comfortable and brought him down to play ping pong in our basement and really tried to alleviate his stress from this traumatic situation. And I was just thinking, man, how beautiful the timing of us being able to have these amazingly bilingual staff that could really assist in ways that I could never do it, Lana could never do it. And so I just thought, yeah, I mean, grace is the beautiful word there.
And my favorite part of that story is, we had talked with her, and she had left our office, and with an appointment date and time for her son to be seen, and she came back for that appointment. We weren't certain if she would come back. She came back and she said, I went to church and I prayed about it. And God told me that Foundations was the place for me to get help and support for myself and my son. And that was so powerful because it was unprovoked. She just came in and shared that, as she re-entered the building, and it was just kind of like, wow.
Yeah, it still gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, it was really truly a beautiful moment, and she came back. They've been back twice now since then, and they are continuing on, in their healing journey, and that's all we can ask for.
Absolutely.
That's all we can ask for.
Good. Well, thank you both. Wow, it's been a great journey.
Great conversation.
Yeah,
It has.
yeah.
It has.
Something about having options in life, something about having a sense of faith that I can see beyond where I am today, and a little hope out there that, with some help, with faith and our own mental health issues and situations that come up in our lives, we can't do this alone. We're not built for that. So how do we come together?
Absolutely.
And your Foundations provides that.
We do. And one thing that I am going to be talking to Tony about more is one of the things that I didn't mention earlier is myself and another staff were recently trained in a program called Soul Shop. And one of the things that we talk about in Soul Shop is not only the mental health aspect related to the shame and the guilt, but the desperation that comes into play. And how is that, when we're talking about things like reconciliation, where does our spirituality come into play? And so it's been a phenomenal opportunity for us to learn and again recommit to that integration of the spirituality component, so that we are not only looking at the mental health, truly diagnosable aspects of life, but we're also talking about the other aspects that are not related to mental health that people still struggle with.
Right.
And how do we address and care for and support that half of the community who does not have a formal diagnosis, but still has levels and struggles with despair at times.
Sure. There are those moments. Moments of
There
grace
are.
and moments of despair. How do we bring those together?
Yes, and oftentimes it takes a great collaboration between organizations like Foundation and our churches. Complete that whole package and the support in its entirety to treat the whole person.
Great. Nice. Yeah. Again, thank you, and thank you for listening and being with us for another town hall meeting.